So our fully equipped recovery vessel Shannon is stationed in Long Beach, California, and is currently standing by to support splashdown today.
That's right, and like you said earlier, we'll be expecting to have that splashdown right off the coast of San Diego, as you can see on your graphic there. So we take into account many different variables, including what landing sites have favorable weather, and SpaceX teams have selected the primary landing site, as we just mentioned, as San Diego. Now, there are a number of weather-related items that play into splashdown and recovery operations. Some of the more obvious factors that impact operations are rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside, obviously, but also for the recovery teams, as we've discussed, on the water. So we're looking for wind speeds that are less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so that we can safely execute recovery operations. And these recovery operations include a lot, right? It's landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly our crew back to shore, but it's also pulling the Dragon spacecraft into Shannon, the recovery vehicle.
Yeah, and as we've been mentioning, there are a number of variables and criteria that come into play, and they all help ensure safety of both the crew and the recovery teams. But weather conditions today are looking great in Southern California near San Diego, and for these operations, SpaceX closely coordinates with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Now, multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
And that's right. We really want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, as you can imagine. And any other boats interfering in the area not only increases the risk to the astronauts in the spacecraft, as well as the teams working to recover them from the water, but also to those themselves who would be going out to see it. So for the safety of the crew, as well as your own safety, we recommend you sit back from home, watch and follow along the action from your TV, as the teams who have trained extensively do this.
For final entry briefing, report when ready to copy.
Dragon's ready to copy.
Dragon, I have no deltas to the previously briefed times. The vehicle is healthy, weather is still looking good, and recovery forces are on site. Predicted COM blackout starting at 0918 Zulu and ending at 0925 Zulu. How copy?
No deltas to the timeline. Everything's healthy and weather looks good. 0918 to 0925 for the COM blackout.
That's a good readback, Dragon. And with that, I'll be looking for you to verify that tablets are secure, visors are down, and restraints are tightened no later than 150 kilometers.
Dragon copy. Roll call.
And we just had some great comms between the core and the crew. It sounds like everything is a go for splashdown. We are expecting the blackout period to begin at 2:18 a.m. Pacific time. That lasts about 6 minutes, completely expected. We will lose comms with the spacecraft as the vehicle heats up with plasma around it, but we do expect them to pass through that in about 6 minutes and regain comms after that. So really exciting, about 21 minutes away from splashdown. And as you might imagine, astronaut training can be extensive, from training that is specific to each crew member's role to learning SpaceX protocols, space station systems, and preparing for the science and outreach activities that they'll be conducting in space. Private astronaut training is rigorous. In addition to the training in the field like they do through NOLS, or NOLS, the Axiom 4 crew spent about 35 days training inside of Dragon. Now, to prepare them for flight, our teams at SpaceX spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics and how to live in microgravity. While this was more of a review for Peggy Whitson, for the rest of the crew, this was their first time flying on Dragon. The training program includes nearly 100 different lessons covering all aspects of the flight. The crew spent time inside of our Dragon training spacecraft to run simulations of ascent, the International Space Station rendezvous and re-entry. And they also spent time at the launch pad in our suit-up room and working through emergency procedures that would be necessary in the unlikely event of a pad abort scenario.
And beyond those critical trainings from SpaceX for the ascent and return phases of the mission, Axiom Space has facilitated a host of efforts over the last 10 months to ensure that the crew and all of those who support them, like ground operations, mission control, flight controllers, are all ready for the mission while on board station. And kicking off efforts for that training at Axiom headquarters in August of 2024, the Ax-4 crew immediately began to familiarize themselves with the range of teams and systems that they would need to become proficient with in order to succeed. From selecting the food that they would eat and learning how to prepare it with the food warming and hydration racks on orbit, to understanding the tools and systems available to them throughout the International Space Station. Every small detail is critical to mission success. So in Building 9 at Johnson Space Center, the crews learned and rehearsed routine operations, medical procedures, emergency situations, and media exercises. All of this built up to full-scale simulations that were then run in coordination with ground teams at Johnson and around the world.
And as the name of the International Space Station suggests, specific modules are owned and operated by different nations. The crew traveled to Germany to earn their certification of these systems in the European module known as Columbus. As an ESA project astronaut, Swabush had additional trainings at the European Astronaut Center. The crew then traveled to Japan to learn the systems of the Japanese experiment module, also known as Kibo. With hands-on training that culminated in a round of testing, the crew became certified to use the systems of Kibo for their flight.
And beyond the specific requirements of each space station module, the crew also participated in a range of efforts that would bond them into a crew and ensure that they were physically and mentally prepared for any mission scenario. So this included a week of training with the National Outdoor Leadership School, or NOLS, where the crew faced a week of kayaking against heavy winds. It also included a day in an altitude chamber to experience how their body reacts to different oxygen levels, and even included an underwater helicopter escape training simulation.
And SpaceX Dragon crew has tablets secured, restraints tightened, and visors down.
SpaceX copies. Crew are configured for entry. 5 minutes until predicted comm blackout. We'll see you on the other side at 0925 Zulu.
Copy 09250 on the other side of the blackout.
Okay, and good comms there from crew that they are ready and configured for their return time. And, you know, an aspect of that is to wrap up our discussion about training. That's a major training point for crew, understanding how their return phase is going to look so that they know, let's go ahead and call ground and let them know that we're ready for maintaining it. So training really is at the heart of any successful mission. You plan, you train, you fly in that order.
Yeah, exactly. Training prepares every astronaut, even those very experienced like Peggy Whitson, and she also did retraining with the Ax-4 crew. It's important for the crew to train together. But this prepares them for any phase, any potential scenario in their mission.
Exactly right. You know, and missions like this are important milestones for everyone involved, from the crew members who fly to those that they represent, to the host of scientists and engineers around the world who have an opportunity for their research or their technology to be tested in microgravity. Everyone learns from these missions. And for Axiom Space, this is at the heart of why we do these missions. We're building opportunities for others to advance what is possible and expand what is known. And we want to enable every human everywhere to take part in this. Now, after a beautiful launch on June 25th, the Ax-4 crew docked with the International Space Station a little over a day later, opening the hatch and greeting the Expedition 73 crew on June 26th. The crew shared some good words in a welcoming ceremony and an astronaut pinning that we don't have there, but did happen, before quickly getting to work on their extensive itinerary. Each crew member brought with them a host of research, technology demonstrations, and outreach objectives, ranging from human physiology to space radiation impact studies, and even some gardening while they were up there. So this crew maintained a very full timeline, but they prepared for this, part of their training. Each crew member wanted to ensure that every minute of this mission was utilized and that all of their objectives were hit. So Peggy, Shukes, Suave, and Tibor were ready to work with their time on board. Over the course of 18 days on board the station, they accomplished over 60 research activities, as well as more than 20 outreach events. But as their time on station came to a close, the Ax-4 crew participated in a brief farewell ceremony where they said their goodbyes to the Expedition 73 crew. And now for more details on the incredible work performed by this crew on orbit, check out axiomspace.com to see more.
Yeah, I love that this crew did so much outreach. 20 events in 18 days is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
very
impressive.
impressed. Plus the 60 experiments
Exactly.
on top of that. So
I mean, and as we discussed earlier, it was a huge priority for them to be able to conduct those outreach events for the people of their countries who may not have had a chance to talk to an astronaut to understand why are we going to space. Now they have a better understanding of that, and like you mentioned earlier, it's get them started young. Let them understand the passion of it. I know that my nieces, my nephew, right? They're excited about space.
Yeah.
They want to be involved in space too. So I can only imagine getting a call from Tibor, getting a call from Suave, and understanding what are we doing up there.
oh, that would be so awesome.
Yeah.
Now we are expecting that blackout period coming up here in just about a couple of minutes. Now this blackout period, this is when the Dragon spacecraft re-enters back into the Earth's atmosphere. What's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of plasma buildup as it's getting more through the atmosphere. And that plasma is getting to about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, building up around the spacecraft. So we will be losing comms. This is expected. Today we're expecting it to last about 6 to 7 minutes, and then we'll regain comms. And you'll probably hear the core after the expected blackout period time has ended. Make some comms, some calls to the crew until they regain the comms and get confirmation from the crew that they can communicate with each other.
That's exactly right. You bring up a good point. An expected loss of comm, or sometimes you'll hear loss of signal, or LOS. It's an expected part of spaceflight. It is planned for. They are predictable, and mission operators or flight controllers work through that to understand when are we going to be able to have and maintain communications with the vehicle, communications with crew, and that can happen at any time during the spaceflight. So for this 5 minutes, right, based on the physics you discussed of the vehicle heating up, it's going to happen, and ground crews can predict for that and work around it. But it's a good reminder that we're waiting for those verbal cues, not just visual cues that we'll get. We've been able to see some visual cues today of crew in their suits, but also be looking for visual cues later, right? Good parachute deploy. We're also listening though for good verbal cues. So we heard this a minute ago. Commander Peggy Whitson was calling down saying that crew is in a good configuration for us to go into this period of no comms.
Yeah, and we do expect that blackout period has probably begun at this point.
That's
and
right.
Speaking of visual cues, I've had the opportunity to talk to some of the astronauts that have flown on our Dragon spacecraft, and they've said it's kind of one of the most spectacular sights they've seen.
Really?
With different, they said it looks like sparks outside of the window, but with multiple different colors, multiple different looks of what that plasma heating up around the vehicle looks like. So they should be experiencing that right now. The Ax-4 crew still inside of the Dragon spacecraft. Again, this blackout period will last approximately 6 to 7 minutes. And again, we won't hear any comms throughout this period until the expected blackout time is complete, and then we'll start hearing comms from the core calling out to the crew.
That's right.
As we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to flush nitrox into the cabin and continuing to top off the Ax-4 crew's suits with cool air. Again, this is what will allow the cabin temperature to remain comfortable while, as I mentioned, the external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat shield is pointing forward, leading the spacecraft to the landing site. Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of Pika 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. First generation Pika was first developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system. SpaceX then partnered with NASA to develop Pika X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 commercial resupply missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon as we prepared to begin flying crew with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass. The remainder of the crew Dragon spacecraft is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during re-entry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained. Now, while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS or thermal protection systems coupled with the EGRess environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior will ensure that the Ax-4 crew will stay cool and comfortable during all the phases of re-entry through splashdown with all that heat surrounding them.
Exactly right. Well, now, as Ax-4 set a new benchmark for private astronaut missions with the most research activities executed aboard an Axiom space mission to the International Space Station to date. With over 60 experiments representing 31 countries, the mission showcased the growing global interest in leveraging low Earth orbit for scientific discovery. The research portfolio included 8 technology demonstrations, 12 life science investigations, and 27 research projects. And this research spanned a wide range of disciplines, from cancer biology to regenerative medicine, to even artificial intelligence, agriculture, and materials science. And this further demonstrates how low Earth orbit is a platform for innovation. Now, many of these studies were designed to address challenges both in space and on Earth, such as improving disease modeling, enhancing food security, and developing smarter autonomous systems. The scale and diversity of the Ax-4 research portfolio reflect a shift toward more collaborative science on orbit together, positioning commercial astronaut missions as catalysts for advancing knowledge and solving real-world problems. You know, Jesse, I think this is one of the most important things about a mission like this, is it allows us an opportunity to understand we have a number of problems that we're trying to address on Earth, and it is a unique opportunity to be able to go to low Earth orbit and understand some of the key aspects of that kind of research. And missions like Ax-4 really allow for those kind of problems to continue to have momentum behind them to be solved. The International Space Station has been tackling so many of these problems for over 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And that research needs to continue. It needs to keep going.
I think a lot of people don't realize that some of the stuff that we have that seem very simple and common to us here on Earth actually sometimes come from the research that happens in space.
Exactly right. Exactly right. One of the things we were talking about earlier is a major aspect of long duration spaceflight is the radiation impacts. And I know for me personally, I thought one of the really interesting research topics or research experiments that was being conducted on orbit for Ax-4 was looking at what are the different materials and properties that we can use to protect against space radiation. So during the mission, we had a great call between Peggy, Suave, and Dr. Lucy Lowe with Axiom Space to discuss exactly what it is that we're trying to protect for and understand why space radiation is so difficult to wrap. So, you know, missions like Ax-4, they're all important. And we are now seeing great confirmations of the Dragon spacecraft making its return back to Earth right now.
And while we are in a blackout period, this is an excellent view, seeing Dragon from the ground as it's re-entering back into Earth's atmosphere. Now, that blackout period is expected to conclude at 2:25 a.m. Pacific time, so just a couple more minutes here, and then hopefully we'll get some comms back between the core and the crew. But in the meantime, at least got some cool views of the crew almost back down here on Earth.
Exactly right. And you know, making that kind of visual confirmation is such an important part of what we're tracking today. We're tracking a lot of very dynamic operations. And so being able to see what we see on the screen there is incredibly important for mission controllers.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Again, we may not hear the crew until they do get those comms back, that acquisition of signal.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX, Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
Dragon, we have you the same. Expect automated chute deployment.
Dragon copies, automated chute deploy.
And great news, as you heard there, we got comms from the Ax-4 crew.
That's exactly what we're waiting for, and I love that you can hear the excitement in Peggy's voice, too.
Yeah.
It's like she's done this before.
Maybe a few times. A great live view on your screen inside of Dragon as they are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And we did hear confirmation that there will be the automatic drogue and parachute deployment coming up here shortly.
And on your screen with that great live view.
GPS converge. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Copy. Nominal GPS chute deploy.
We're going to hear a lot of comms back and forth throughout these last 5 minutes here as the Corps will be calling out their altitude as they're making their way down, as well as when the drogue parachutes deploy and the main parachutes deploy. And then as they get closer and closer to Earth, just keeping the crew updated with how close they are before splashdown so that they can expect that splashdown.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And those are the things that crew that you're seeing there on the left side of your screen are following along with their onboard telemetry. And for you at home as well, you can see on your screens as well things like vehicle speed, vehicle altitude. All those are really important metrics that we're trying to understand as part of the visual confirmations, the audio communications or the verbal communications that we've gotten with crew. We're also getting vehicle communications and telemetry to all understand how we're looking as we lead up to these next 4 minutes before.
And there you can see on your screen, the seats are rotating for the crew. This prepares them for that splashdown, so they do
brace for drogue window.
They do reorient the crew depending on the dynamic events that are happening, so the crew does lean back during re-entry.
Crew is braced.
And then they are sitting up a little bit more upright for those drogue and main parachutes to deploy.
That's right. Having them in that position helps distribute the forces correctly so that when they're experiencing that dynamic event, they're as comfortable as they can possibly be.
Yeah. We're now waiting for confirmation that the Dragon's chutes have deployed, coming up here just in under a minute or so. Just prior to the deployment of the initial drogue chutes, Dragon automatically safes the propulsion system. Dragon then deploys its drogue parachutes to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle. Then just before drogue deployment, seats automatically rotate to 26 degrees, which we just saw there, to keep the crew within acceptable G limits for entry and landing. And
excellent view.
Great view. Drogue parachutes are deployed. View looking forward.
Drogue descent rate nominal.
Descent rate nominal, copy.
Again, we're going to hear a lot of comms throughout this next 3 minutes here. This is looking forward on the Dragon spacecraft up at the chutes. Those drogue parachutes are fully deployed now, so we do expect those main parachutes to deploy here shortly.
If you're just joining us, we have now confirmed that the Ax-4 crew on their return home is roughly 2.5 minutes out from splashdown, and our main chutes have deployed.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
Copy. Main chute descent rate nominal, 1,000 meters for Dragon.
We copy 1,000 meters.
Great visual confirmation as well as those comms that the 4 main parachutes have deployed. Again, we are going to be slowing down the vehicle from 350 miles per hour all the way down to just about 15, 16 miles per hour by the time that the vehicle touches down and splashes down into the ocean.
Exactly right. You mentioned these beautiful visual confirmations that we're getting. An important aspect of today's specific splashdown is that it's occurring at night.
That's Dragon 800.
Copy 800 meters.
Commander Peggy Whitson confirming the spacecraft's altitude as it's making its descent into the Pacific Ocean just off the coast of San Diego in Southern California.
Yes, love that it's coming off the coast of my hometown.
600 meters.
600 meters.
And at 600 meters, we're just under a minute before that expected splashdown. The landing in water is a lot simpler and more reliable. Provides a little bit of margin against unlikely parachute issues. We did have to learn how to make Dragon waterproof as we are splashing down into the ocean. But
SpaceX copies 400 meters. Reminder to brace for splashdown.
That's a pretty cool view.
Yeah. That's right. Maintaining the vehicle's signature through things like cloud layer and any kind of atmospheric disturbance allows us to maintain visual contact with the vehicle as it's making its final descent for its water landing.
And it's a little foggy, as you can see there.
Yeah, Pacific fog is rolling in.
We've got some very bright lights as Dragon, you can see the ocean there. Dragon is about to touch down in just a few seconds here.
And working their way towards the vehicle are the SpaceX and Axiom support teams that will be present for the next phase of our splashdown coverage today. At this point, we'll be waiting for confirmation of the crew's safe landing, and then we'll move into the phases of this mission, which are really, let's recover the vehicle, let's recover the crew, let's make our assessments, and at that point, we'll be covering.
And we have splashdown of the Ax-4 crew back on planet Earth.
Welcome home.
SpaceX Dragon splashdown. We are in Stable 1.
SpaceX copies splashdown in Stable 1. On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
And thanks for the great ride and the safe trip, and Grace is happy to be back.
We are happy to have you back home safely as well.
Some words between the core and our commander, Peggy Whitson, as the Ax-4 crew has made it back home, splashed down at
Dragon, SpaceX, for your awareness, SISTI system verifications are in progress. I will report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Dragon.
Yeah, so now you can see a couple fast boats are going to be approaching the Dragon spacecraft. They're going to start with making sure that the spacecraft is safe. They're going to do some sniff checks. They're going to pick up those main parachutes. As Dragon splashed down, the chutes were immediately cut to make sure there's no safety issues there. So we'll pick up those main parachutes up. And once the crew deems that the spacecraft is safe, then our recovery vessel Shannon can begin to approach and begin the recovery process. So we are now eagerly waiting on recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with the Ax-4 crew. Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to save itself following splashdown.
So for those of you just joining us, the return of Ax-4 has gone smoothly so far, and we just got great confirmation that crew has splashed down. So Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle 15 miles per hour. And at that point, they successfully splashed down in the Pacific Ocean at 2:31 a.m. Pacific time, off the coast of Southern California. So at this point, like you mentioned, Jesse, we are just waiting for Dragon's recovery from Shannon.
Yeah, upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically releases the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. Dragon then automatically saves any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps temperatures in check inside the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate.
And as we're watching, SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which move very quickly to get to the splashdown point. And those are being followed by Shannon, the main recovery vessel, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles here in these operations. The first fast boat makes initial contact and is focused on immediate safety inspection of the vehicle, checking for vehicle integrity and any presence of hypergolic propellant vapors. This ensures that it's safe for Shannon to approach the Dragon spacecraft. Now, once Dragon is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves a redundant boat to the first. So we'll see a team member. We'll also see a team member rather on a jet ski helping to gather up the now detached parachutes that you mentioned came off. Jesse.
Yeah, and it'll take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. Then once they're complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted into the recovery vessel. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft so that they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. Now, it will take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. And then after medical checkouts, the crew will return to shore by helicopter and then be flown back to Houston.
That's right. And each of these next steps are entirely dependent on the status of the crew. Axiom Space is
Dragon, SpaceX, we have pulled go for recovery personnel approach. Expect fast boats alongside in 1 minute.
Dragon copies. We'll be waiting.
And with that call from Core to Commander Peggy Whitson, you can see now the fast boat making the two fast boats rather making an approach to the Dragon that you see in the middle of your screen with that flashing green beacon. Now, as we mentioned, Axiom Space's Chief Medical Officer is on the main recovery ship Shannon and is ready to put eyes on this crew for the first time since they departed quarantine together. And our medical teams will be with them every step of the way home.
It is nighttime, so we do have this infrared camera to help us see a little bit more clearly. That's the Dragon spacecraft in the middle of your screen there.
These SpaceX fast boats are now making initial contact with the Axiom-4, with the Dragon spacecraft, excuse me.
You can also see the red and green lights on Dragon, just similar to starboard and port on a ship. We have that for nights like this where it's a little bit harder to see the orientation of the vehicle, so those red and green lights help us understand which side of the vehicle and orientation that we are approaching. And it does look like they are pulling a main chute out of the water there. Again, those detach immediately as soon as the spacecraft splashes down. This helps prevent the wind from dragging the spacecraft after it's splashed down and helps keep the crew safe. But we do recover those main parachutes, keep them out of the water.
Exactly. And as we just discussed, each of these fast boats has a very specific role that they play. That is all part of, again, the ground operations that support the retrieval and recovery of the spacecraft, as well as the Ax-4 crew. So all of these are part of the ground training that's required in order to pull off those operations safely and successfully. So even though we're having, splashdown at night, right, we're able to ensure that we're executing smoothly, but executing successfully. We're now looking at some additional views that we're getting in of the fast boats making their contact with the Dragon spacecraft.
And we should be seeing a crew member actually climb on board the spacecraft.
Yep.
Do some final safety checks and then help begin setting up the rigging for the spacecraft to be lifted out of the water.
That's right. It's all part of a coordination, a choreography of events, right? Getting from spacecraft is in the water. What are the next few steps that have to occur before we can get Dragon onto the recovery vessel Shannon? And this is a very key moment in that.
And right now you can see them doing the sniffs, making sure that there's no hazardous gas or chemicals around the vehicle and that it's safe for the team to actually approach and climb onto the spacecraft. And as always, the recovery crew is wearing the PPE necessary to perform these operations. PPE is personal protective equipment.
And it's a good reminder that even in this phase of the mission, we're excited crew is home, but the job's not done yet. We're taking this time to make sure that we're operating smoothly, that we're operating safely, so that we ensure a safe return for the crew on board the vessel and back home to their families and teams.
Yeah, we call conclusion of the mission when the crew egresses the spacecraft, and egress means to exit the spacecraft. Got some calm waters there, which is great.
Yes, exactly what we're
Southern
looking
California, Southern Pacific Ocean, as we splash down off the coast of San Diego today.
Dragon, SpaceX, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. We have SpaceX flight surgeon standing by. Please confirm crew are ready for post-splashdown PMC.
Dragon copy go, and we are ready for post-PMC.
Copy that, Dragon. The next call you hear will be from flight surgeon on Dragon to ground privatized.
And you heard those comms. The team is going to do some medical checks. They are going to do that on a private net. And that's what those comms were, confirming that they're switching the nets that they will be communicating on. And this is just to make sure that the crew is feeling okay.
Exactly right.
Through all those dynamic events.
Yep.
While for us watching Dragon re-enter the Earth's atmosphere from afar, there's a lot going on in that spacecraft there with the crew. So just making sure that the crew is feeling good and checking in with how they're doing.
Exactly. It's an important touch point for kind of reaching a key milestone on the return trip home. As just mentioned, it's a very dynamic phase of flight. And those private medical conferences or PMCs with a SpaceX flight surgeon really allow ground teams to be able to make an initial assessment of crew while the team is also, the ground teams outside are continuing to work that rigging. They mentioned it take about 25 minutes for crew to rig and then hoist the Dragon spacecraft into the recovery vessel. So while those operations are happening, crew will also be talking with ground medical personnel just to get an understanding of, hey, how's everybody doing? How are we looking forward to it?
Yeah. And they did confirm that the vehicle was safe to approach. They did some hypergol checks. They also checked the thrusters that did not fire to make sure that there are no leaks from those thrusters. We do have Super Dracos on the vehicle in case of an abort emergency during ascent. We did not need those thrusters on this mission. And again, they are only used for the ascent portion, but we do want to make sure that throughout the mission, as the Dragon spacecraft was docked to the International Space Station for 18 days, that everything is still good and safe, again, to complete these final recovery operations. And again, it's a little dark because it's very early morning, but you can see the little window on Dragon and the light. Little light inside there as the crew is patiently waiting recovery operations.
It's a very different view that they're having outside that window than they had for their flight up and their flight home.
Yes.
But all the same, I'm sure that they're also glad to say, hey, we're home. If you're just joining us from home, you are seeing live views of the Dragon spacecraft that has returned home from the Axiom 4 mission. After launching on June 25th, the Axiom 4 mission...
Dragon, SpaceX, Dragon to ground is now unprivatized. Com check. We
have you loud and clear on Dragon ground.
Copy, Dragon. We have you the same.
You can now see on the screen SpaceX support personnel beginning the rigging procedures to ensure that the Dragon spacecraft is rigged.
SpaceX, be advised, we're going to step into transitioning the forward link. COM will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes. Rigging continues nominally.
Dragon copies, 5 minutes. LOS.
Again, the Corps just keeping the crew updated with the operations that they're performing. They won't have comms for about 5 minutes, but rigging is continuing, as we can see there, with the recovery crew member standing on top of the spacecraft.
Yeah, working very important procedures for the next phase of the Ax-4 mission. And for those of you who've been following along since June 25th, when the Falcon 9 lifted off from Kennedy 39A, this was a pristine new Dragon. That crew had the privilege and the pleasure of naming Grace. And now that it's gone through its first mission and landed back safely in the Pacific Ocean, you can see exactly what the spacecraft goes through on its return home, but very much a sign of a successful mission.
Yeah, I love the tradition that the first crew that flies in the spacecraft get to name the spacecraft. And Peggy Whitson had some great words on why they named the spacecraft Grace,
Yeah.
which I think is amazing. And we've got a great fleet of Dragon spacecraft. And speaking of Commander Peggy Whitson, she's actually our third frequent flyer.
Yeah.
Our first frequent flyer was Michael Lopez Alegria from Axiom Space.
Yep.
Second being Jared Isaacman when he flew on the Polaris Dawn mission. And now Peggy Whitson flying for a second time on a Dragon spacecraft. At SpaceX, we're trying to make these vehicles reusable, just like aircraft when you fly and fly over again multiple times a day. And we're getting closer and closer to that with the same crew members flying again, which is awesome.
And it's important to note, right, that kind of mission-to-mission lineage, right, allows crew members like Peggy Whitson, like Michael Lopez Alegria, to better help inform the next crews that are coming with them, right? The more familiarity that you get with the vehicle, the better equipped you are on your mission. And I, as a personal Peggy super fan, I cannot imagine a more fitting astronaut to be able to give a name to a new vehicle. I love the messaging behind why they chose to name it Grace. And to your point, Jesse, about the frequent flyers, I loved that during launch, we could see I don't know if it's a new tradition, potentially, but we got to see some boarding passes that SpaceX provided to the Ax-4 crew. And because of her frequent flyer status, Peggy Whitson got a gold boarding pass. And I absolutely adore that she was able to have that distinction.
Yes, just add it to her resume.
Yeah, you can add it to the resume. SpaceX frequent flyer.
Yeah, I love the boarding passes. Again, always trying to make it as common as aircraft, planes that we fly on every single day.
Exactly.
And we're still just in the beginning, but I feel like we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years, and we still have a lot of new things, new missions, and improvements that we want to make to, future spacecraft and launch vehicles. So I'm excited for the future. I really do believe that we could get to aircraft, plane, regular flight, multiple flights a day within our future.
I think we can. And human spaceflight it's a team sport. And it is something that you are always learning from. No matter how commonplace any of these missions get, right? There is always the amount of training that you put into it to execute that plan, train, fly mentality. And being able to perform these missions, being able to say that Peggy has flown on multiple Dragon spacecraft at this point, kind of highlight that every time she's going to still go through the same training that she did for the last mission, that all these crew members, that all of the ground support personnel are going to be ready to support missions like these from even well before crew is on the launch pad, all the way through splashdown, pulling them onto the recovery vessel here for the Dragon spacecraft. And you can see on your screen both the fast boat and the recovery vessel Shannon making approach to Grace, our Dragon spacecraft.
There you could see what we call the Dragon nest. When the spacecraft is lifted up out of the water, it's going to seat into that ring that you see there at the end of the recovery vessel there. And once the spacecraft is nestled into the nest, it'll translate to a deck that meets the height of where the hatch on the Dragon spacecraft is. That'll enable the crew to egress or exit the spacecraft easily onto a platform in the recovery vessel.
And talking about the crew, Jesse, we've mentioned this idea of this kind of understanding the aspects of spaceflight, as mentioned earlier, being able to do STEM engagement on the mission, but also being able to spend time and honestly, your crew commander being somebody like Peggy Whitson, for Shukes and Suave and Tibor to be able to take that knowledge back to their respective space agencies and to their countries is a huge step forward for what you just mentioned earlier about making sure that that human spaceflight as a team sport continues for everybody to understand what's going on, because now Shukes and Suave and Tibor have a very important distinction, and they now have a very unique perspective on what it takes for a human spaceflight mission to occur. as first time astronauts, they're going to take back all that knowledge from their time on the International Space Station and be able to make huge impacts with their space agencies in their countries.
Yeah, I'm sure they learned a lot from Peggy Whitson, but also the other crew members that are currently on board the International Space Station. They got to interact with so many different people with diverse skills.
Exactly.
And 18 days is quite a long time in space.
It is.
So it's a good amount of time. I believe this is the longest duration for an Axiom space mission so far.
That's right. We heard a lot of those kind of sentiments shared between the Ax-4 crew and the Expedition 73 crew currently on the International Space Station during their farewell ceremony, during their undocking last night. It really kind of underscored the aspect of once you're up there, once that hatch is open, it's all one team. Mm-hmm. It is. Like we keep saying it's a team sport, but once they were in there integrating with the Expedition 73 crew, that Ax-4 crew was learning so much more. And it was highlighted in everything that they were able to execute, right? We mentioned earlier over 60 research projects, over 20 STEM engagements, outreach events. Over 18 days, that's an incredible amount of time packed into their timeline, just coupled with sleeping and being there, but also like the aspects that they're not timeline, but engaging with the crew, sharing cultural touch points, understanding each other, getting to learn each other. And they did have the benefit of getting to meet this Expedition 73 crew before their flight. So by the time they were opening that hatch, they kind of knew each other. And I think it's an incredible aspect of this mission for sure.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder what their comms were. I'll meet you in space.
Exactly right. I wish I had the ability to say that. That'd be so cool.
One day when we're all able to fly in space.
All right, sounds good. I'll see you in space then.
See you in space, John. Looks like we're getting closer. They are pulling the spacecraft towards the recovery vessel. Looks like we're rigged up, and you can see the hydraulic lift moving forward and down, and then it will begin to lift the spacecraft out of the water and again into that Dragon nest that you see there on the recovery vessel. I think one of my favorite parts is the recovery crew that's on the spacecraft gets to jump into the ocean when they're done.
Yeah.
And it's nighttime in the Pacific, so it might be a little cold.
We'll be a little chilly.
But definitely a unique part of the job.
Exactly right. And you can see all the support crew. There was just a fast boat on the screen that made its way off screen there, but you can see the number of support crew that's kind of going into supporting an operation like this. It may look like it's not happening very fast, but there are a lot of steps that each of these crew members are responsible for ensuring that the Dragon spacecraft is pulled into that nest safely but smoothly, and they're working towards that now. There he goes.
Love that. Despite the freezing temperatures, it looks fun.
And he got out of the water pretty fast, so I think you're right about that.
All right. Looks like lift is about to begin.
Those of you just tuning in, the Ax-4 crew splashed down off the coast of Southern California a little under 30 minutes ago. And we are now in the
Dragon SpaceX. Rigging is complete. Stand by for capsule lift.
Dragon copies.
Dragon SpaceX, capsule lift in progress, brace.
good verbal confirmations there and visual confirmations that we're getting a successful lift.
Dragon copies.
Again, those comms, crew can't see what's happening outside of the spacecraft, so letting the crew know what's happening so they understand, you know, the vehicle moving, what those different feelings are with the spacecraft moving around.
Trying to give crew some level of situational awareness of where they are and where they're going next. So Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and for the journey back into port. The spacecraft is currently was just lifted, as you saw, and set on the nest. And from here, it'll be centered and oriented. And then from there, Dragon will be translated into the hangar underneath the helipad aboard the ship so that we can then open the hatch. And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one in to check on the crew to see if they are ready to egress out of the vehicle. And as we noted earlier, Axiom medical teams are also on the recovery vessel working in tandem with SpaceX staff to assess and assist the crew.
The astronauts will egress, or what we call exit, from Dragon's side hatch, pending spacecraft orientation in the water. Before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. Now, once the hatch is opened, that will be the Axiom-4 crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding Falcon 9 at the start of their mission on June 25th.
And that will be an exciting moment for the crew, I know. But for the crew and also for the ground crews, getting that first confirmation of your crew exiting the spacecraft, getting good medical checks, and then coming out giving a thumbs up is something everybody wants to be able to see, and we'll be able to see it soon.
Yeah. And it looks like the spacecraft is nestled into the nest.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery ship. Apology for the delayed call earlier. We are still working to transition the forward link. Recovery personnel are completing their final checks, and I will let you know when we are ready for translation across the deck to the egress platform.
Now they are de-rigging the spacecraft, but they're also doing some final sniff or leak checks and then covering the thruster locations prior to opening that hatch. Let's just make sure that the vehicle is more than safe for the crew members to exit the vehicle. Again, if you're just now joining us, the Dragon spacecraft has been lifted onto the recovery vessel Shannon. Now the recovery crew is safing the vehicle. They're putting some covers on the thrusters of the vehicle just to ensure, now that the spacecraft is no longer in operation, we don't need those thrusters. They did some sniff checks before they put some covers on it.
SpaceX, comm check.
We have you loud and clear in Dragon.
Copy that, Dragon. We have you the same. Welcome aboard the recovery ship. We are working to troubleshoot the forward link transition. Stand by for translation across the deck. I'll let you know when we're ready for that.
Okay, copy.
The crew is preparing for translation. This is where that Dragon nest is going to move the spacecraft towards the deck, and that deck is going to meet the bottom of the Dragon hatch, and that'll enable the crew to egress or exit the Dragon spacecraft onto a platform on the recovery vessel. And again, the recovery crew looks like they may have finished safing the vehicle in preparation for that translation.
As you mentioned, Jesse, that hatch that you see right in the center of the spacecraft, when we see crew egress from that, SpaceX medical personnel will be there to assess crew and assist them along with other ground support crew out of the spacecraft. And at that point, that will be our first time being able to see the Ax-4 crew since their liftoff to the International Space Station on June 25th. On a side note, I do love seeing crew go into and come out of the hatch, whether it's the side hatch or whether it is the docking port. I love seeing the smiles on their faces.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for them once we open this Dragon side hatch. Again, it'll be the first breath of fresh air in about 20 days for them since they boarded the Falcon 9 on launch day.
And it is an interesting distinction. You launch in the Atlantic and you splash down the Pacific. It's very different breaths of air that you're getting.
And you traveled all over space for thousands of miles.
288 orbits, something like 7.6 million miles. all just to come down across the country.
Millions of miles,
Yeah.
I should say. It's definitely a great passport to have.
It is. Maybe that could be the next memento that that we can provide crew before they lift off as a passport that they can stamp.
I think the locations would be orbits
That'd be really cool.
outside of Earth.
Yeah.
Earth orbits, low Earth orbit. Again, next up, we are expecting the translation of the Dragon spacecraft named Grace, named by the Axiom Mission 4 crew. Again, the spacecraft will translate in preparation for hatch opening and exiting of the vehicle.
A few moments ago, Core spoke with the Ax-4 crew to let them know that the translation will be happening soon.
Dragon SpaceX, final checks are complete. Translation across the deck to the egress platform will begin shortly. There is a chance that we get a lot of alarms. No concern.
Dragon copies.
And we have movement. Translation is beginning. Some residual ocean water splashing down, and then we are washing down the hatch area. Again, just preparing for the vehicle's side hatch to be opened. Getting some of that salt water off, maybe some of that plasma from reentry off.
Right, all nominal processes to ensure that that crew can safely egress the vehicle, but also that ground personnel are safely protected while handling the spacecraft and crew as well. So at this point, we can see SpaceX personnel positioning themselves to support in this, as well as the spacecraft making final approaches to that upper landing pad for crew to egress the vehicle. After that freshwater wash down of the hatch area, we're seeing some final wipe downs as well. For those with a keen eye as well, you could see on the side of Grace, as it was making its approach towards the upper landing, the Axiom logo proudly displayed on the spacecraft. We had some great shots during the docking footage of SpaceX, Axiom, making a beautiful image of the vehicle docked to the International Space Station. It's a little worn.
Little
but
toasty.
A little toasty.
Little toasty.
All part of nominal ops, though.
3,500 degrees Fahrenheit
That'll
will
do
do that.
Dragon SpaceX, standby for side hatch opening and egress of some smiling faces.
Here we go.
All right, we're looking forward to it.
They are just about to open that side hatch. And again, first person that'll greet the crew will be the medical officer.
The hatch is open, and ground crews are making first contact with the Axiom 4 crew.
And you see that square looking tool. That's just a protector for the hatch seal for while the crew egresses. This is a reusable vehicle, so we are protecting both the crew as well as the spacecraft, making sure there's no damage that happens and that the crew doesn't bump their head on anything on the spacecraft. Looks like we're getting, the crew's getting some first photos.
Yep. That's a good sign that they had good initial comms with medical personnel. So this time we are now just, if you're just joining us, we're waiting for the Ax-4 crew to egress or exit the Dragon spacecraft, also known as Grace, as part of the conclusion of their more than 20-day mission to the International Space Station.
You can see the crew is handing some of their cargo. That looks like their tablets that they use throughout their mission.
Making it a little easier for crew to make their way out of the spacecraft as well.
Looks like they just removed the footrests. Gives the crew some space to get out of their seats while they are exiting the vehicle.
Now getting some great internal views of the Ax-4 crew in their
Yes.
spacecraft.
I already saw some big smiles
Yep.
as people, we've all been saying.
As we wait for the Ax-4 crew to egress the vehicle, you can see ground crew is still putting in aspects of I'm not going to call it rigging, but hardware to help the crew get out of the spacecraft more easily. Reminder that they've been in microgravity for a little over 20 days, and occasionally your first few steps back on Earth can be slightly challenging.
It's a little different in microgravity than dealing with the gravity here on Earth. Just now joining us, we are waiting for the Ax-4 crew to exit the Dragon spacecraft Grace. Peggy, Shux, Suave, and Tibor are at the end of their Axiom Mission 4. After 20 days in space, 18 on board the International Space Station. 18 days.
Now, this wraps up a very significant portion of the mission, but it's not entirely over. We still have a few medical checks to go. And then in addition to that, the Ax-4, all the research done on the Ax-4 mission is all going to be in a world of post-processing, analysis, assessment, and that's all part of it, as well as crew debriefs. So, following after crew egresses the spacecraft and gets good medical checks, at that point we'll be getting the crew back home and then continuing the final, we'll call it terrestrial-based operations of the
That's
Ax-4
right.
mission.
I guess it's more of the end of the space-facing portion of the mission.
Operational phases. Right. We're still going to take our time to get there. You can see ground crews are still working with the crew members and hardware inside. They've established some ground support equipment to help in the aid of the Ax-4 crew getting out of the spacecraft.
And some of their aids are not too complex. That white platform that you see there is essentially a slide.
Yeah. But an important one.
A very important slide.
But in addition to that slide, we do have, there's a complex tool that you mentioned earlier, Jesse, about protecting the seals. We can see now crew crew members looking to make their egress from spacecraft along that slide.
Sliding out.
And there she is. We see Commander Peggy Whitson, all smiles, exiting the spacecraft Grace. That is a beautiful sight. Peggy Whitson, the Ax-4 commander, is home, having logged 695 days in space on 5 flights. She is the 7th on the all-time list for most days in space by a human. It's an incredible feat.
Legendary. So far, we've had Commander Peggy Whitson exit the Dragon spacecraft. We are waiting for the remaining 3 crew members of the Ax-4 crew. There's no real order to the egress. It's really up to the crew. So we're patiently waiting to see who's up next.
Right. If Peggy is in the indication, which I think she is for this particular crew, we'll see another big smile coming out of the Dragon spacecraft in a moment.
And we've got our pilot, Shubhanshu Shukla, as our second crew member exiting the spacecraft. And some big smiles, as you said. India reached a major milestone for the nation's space exploration goals. Ax-4 pilot Shubhanshu Shukla became the first astronaut to fly from the country's newly established astronaut corps. His participation marks a vital step forward for ISRO's Gaganyaan program, which aims to send Indian astronauts into space aboard domestically developed spacecraft. Shukla's flight demonstrates India's readiness to execute international missions and reflects the country's broader ambitions to become a key player in the global space community. As India continues to expand its capabilities in crewed spaceflight, this mission serves as both a proving ground and a symbol of its commitment to innovation, collaboration, and leadership in space exploration.
Now, at this time, we are waiting for the mission specialists of the Ax-4 mission, Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of Poland and Tibor Kapu of Hungary, to now egress the Dragon spacecraft. We have our third crew member now egressing the vehicle. And there is Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of Poland. Sław is all smiles for this, which I love to see. Now, Poland's participation in the Ax-4 mission through the Ignis program marked a pivotal step in the country's growing role in space exploration. Astronaut Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski, flying in partnership with the European Space Agency, led a research agenda focused on some of the most pressing challenges in human spaceflight: mental health, artificial intelligence, and radiation monitoring. These areas are critical not only for ensuring astronaut well-being on long-duration missions, but also for enabling safe and sustainable exploration beyond low Earth orbit. The Ignis mission reflects Poland's strategic investment in cutting-edge science and its ambition to contribute meaningfully to the future of deep space travel. It also signals a broader shift in Europe's space landscape, where emerging space nations are taking on increasingly vital roles in shaping the next era of exploration. And based on that smile, I'd say Sław felt like he had a very successful mission.
3 or 4 crew members have exited the Dragon spacecraft. We're now just waiting for the final crew member, Tibor, to exit the spacecraft here. And last but not least, mission specialist Tibor Kapu. Hungary marked a significant milestone in its space ambitions with the Ax-4 mission as astronaut Tibor Kapu became the first Hungarian to reach the International Space Station, and all smiles from him there. His participation under the banner of the Hunor Hungarian to Orbit program represents Hungary's commitment to advancing its role in international space exploration. This mission signifies the country's return to human spaceflight after decades and highlights its strategic investment in science, technology, and innovation.
And Jesse, it was wonderful seeing Tibor's smiles and waves and high fives. You knew how important this mission was to the crew as they were prepping for it and throughout the mission. And seeing them be able to egress with the same smiles that they went into the capsule with, or into the spacecraft with. Well, at this point, the crew is now safely back home on Earth.
Yeah. Now that our crew are safely back home on Earth and getting the first checks by SpaceX and Axiom space medical teams, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their historic return. Ax-4 lifted off from Launch Complex, from Launch Pad 39A at 2:31 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, June 25th, and arrived at station on Thursday, June 26th. They spent about 20 days in space and 18 of those days on the International Space Station before undocking yesterday. And then this morning at 2:31 a.m. Pacific Time, they splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California. What an amazing journey it's been for them so far.
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. And Jesse, it's been fantastic again. Sharing desk with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this, and I'm glad we got to spend this time together. But now this crew's entire trip is home, we're ready to move on to the next phase of the mission. So to SpaceX, thank you for an incredible flight and taking such great care of our crew. To NASA, and the International Space Station partners, and the Expedition 73 crew, thank you for helping make the efforts of the Ax-4 mission possible. We're really looking forward to collaborating with everyone again soon. And a special thank you to ISRO, ESA, and Hunor for entrusting us with this mission. And to all of you watching at home, it's been an honor and a privilege to share the journey of Peggy, Shukla, Suav, and Tibor to space and back again. So as we bring this mission to a close, we celebrate how the Ax-4 mission continues to demonstrate that the opportunities presented in microgravity have now grown to include more countries, more institutions, industries, and individuals than ever before. Through missions like this, we're redefining the pathway to low Earth orbit and building for beyond. So be sure to check out axiomspace.com to learn more about flight opportunities available along our journey to the world's first commercial space station. I'm John Rackham, and we're now signing off with a final welcome home to the crew of Ax-4.
And I'm Jesse Anderson. Thanks to everyone for joining us on another successful mission to the International Space Station. Check out spacex.com/launches for updates and for the schedule of upcoming missions. And be sure to follow at SpaceX on X. And that'll do us for us here in Hawthorne. We'll see you on the next mission.
Welcome home.